Right, so welcome everybody to the 15th meeting of Moving Forward RBE Learning Network. It's great to see you all and see some new faces, or at least one new face and some people I haven't seen for a while. Now, my name is Charlotte Wenner and I'm an RBE supporter. And before we actually get started with the presentation this evening by Scott Andrews about McMurtry's Axiom of Life Value, which
that means my mother is getting up,
okay.
And I'm up and down.
Okay, that's fine,
I can hear.
Steve.
I can hear. Yeah.
So you might have seen, some of you might have seen that I posted an essay about it this week. For me, it was the first time I've actually delved into McMurtry's work with any depth. And I must say it was a brilliant revelation of actually what it contains. So I'm really happy that Scott can be with us tonight. Before we actually get started with the presentation, can we just do a quick introduction with just your name and maybe where you're from? Let's begin with our newest and ladies before gentlemen. Fiona, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Fiona, I'm in the UK, and I'm doing stuff with the Money Free Party and the Zeitgeist Movement in the UK.
Okay, thanks. Steve, can you introduce yourself with your name and just a few sentences about what you do with RBE?
In Hawaii right now, taking care of my mother for 6 months, but I'm done this week. I'm going back to Colorado next week. And yeah, I've been a supporter for the RBE for 10 years, been making videos for about 8 years or something like that. And there you go, that's enough. Mm-hmm.
You're muted.
I'm the worst at that. Nuno, would you like to give us your name and a little bit about yourself?
Yes, sure. I'm Nuno. I'm from Portugal, and I'm some kind of active member in either the Zeitgeist Movement or the Venus Project, mainly only on Facebook. You're muted.
I am. I'm just going to leave my microphone on. If you hear me eating, that's the price you have to pay. Yuri, could you tell us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about what you do?
Yes, so I'm Yuri, and I live in São Paulo now, the capital, big city in São Paulo, in Brazil, and I work in video production, usually as a video editor and colorist. And I'm just a regular supporter of the Venus Project and the resource-based economy, I guess. I'm really deeply interested and I learned a lot about it. And I want to contribute to the transition, to developing tools and promoting the project.
Great, Yuri. Actually, I think your presentation is way overdue. We have to have a talk pretty soon about what you can tell us about what you're doing. Erica, could you tell us, we can't see you, I don't know, maybe you want that, but could you introduce yourself a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you do with RBE? I think she's
muted.
Yeah, she's got kids there. Okay, so she can only listen. Thanks a lot, Erica. We're really happy you're here. And just to bring people up to date, Erica is constantly involved with street activism, with writing and filming wonderful things about RBE. She's really a model for all of us about getting out there and talking to people as much as possible. Okay, so last but not least, we have our presenter, Scott, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to you. As most of you know, during the presentation, normally we just listen, but of course Scott is free to allow questions. It's a pretty deep subject, so maybe during the talk we'll want to have questions. And after he's finished his presentation, then each of us gets a chance also to share, to ask more questions, or anything to contribute to this evening's meetings. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Scott.
Thank you, Charlotte. Can everybody hear me? All good?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm there. Great. Oh, cool. That's great. Hey, Charlotte, just a quick question. How long do I have for this? I didn't do my homework on checking that.
Now, you know, I usually say to people about half an hour, but regular participants will tell you that I always do twice as much.
Yeah, so this will be longer than that, but I will try and get through it as quickly as I can. But it's an important and in-depth subject. What I'm trying to do is make it as simple as possible as well. So can I
ask you just one question?
Of course.
If people want to need some clarification, can they do that during the presentation, or do you prefer that we wait until the end?
Probably the end, but to be honest, I might put a couple of moments in where I might ask. It's split up into sections, so I'll probably just ask if that's okay, for clarification. Sorry, for questions, or if there's, it flows, and yeah, is that cool? So yeah, so if you don't mind just holding your questions, I will ask for clarification, for questions, and definitely at the end there will be some time, of course. All good. So do I just share my screen? Is that what I do? I've never done this before.
If you should be able to just click on that green link at the bottom of your screen. It says share screen. Yeah. There we go.
Can you see that, everybody?
Yes.
They should be.
Okay, all good.
Yep. Brilliant.
Okay, all good, no problem. So yeah, so look, thanks so much, Charlotte, for organising this. Really appreciate it. So today I will present this life grounding common ground, I've called it. I've tried to make this presentation suitable for non-RBEers as well. So there are a couple of simple things in here, but it's all part of the same train of thought. So what I'm going to present here really is impartial insofar as it cuts against, I'll repeat that again, it cuts against all theories that have no common life interest grounded in. Okay, so it's a bit intellectual, but I have tried to simplify as much as possible. Don't be scared off by the equation you see at the beginning. That's the whole point of today, is to explain that symbolic expression. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So firstly, this presentation is divided into three parts. First, part one, basically, I will lay bare the basic inner logic of the cancer system that we endure. Including the many levels that this, what John McMurtry calls the great sickness, what this great sickness is now working on at the social level to paralyze our progress. I'll also work to show that our future capacity to maintain life support systems on this planet is indeed determined by this diagnosis. In part two, we will arrive at the unseen unifying alternative, which is the unifying concept of all productive economy and real life wealth that bridges across all domains whatsoever, without exception. And in part three, I will very, very, very quickly run through the critical importance of adjusting our rhetoric to life coherence, wherever possible, at the social level, to ensure recovery from this cancer system. So basically, just going to start part one, diagnostic determinism. Before I begin, I want to state that most of the information presented here is based upon the work, as Charlotte's already expressed, of Dr. John McMurtry, Professor Emeritus, University of Guelph, and Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada. Now, I've been studying his work for approximately about 5 years, and he would be the first to tell you that he hasn't really invented anything here. He's just simply decoded this globally life-invading value system. So the most important thing to be aware of is that until we understand the problem, obviously we can't arrive at the unifying alternative. And I know that you guys all get, many aspects of this, and it's all good. But again, as I said, I'm breaking this down to its pure, most simple logic possible. Now, basically, McMurtry gets a lot of flack for the syntax that he uses. So the syntax is kind of the words that we put together in the English language. He gets a lot of flack in respect of, you know, some of it's quite high level. As Charlotte said in her article the other day, actually, which was very, very, very valid, he is an academic, he's not an activist, and he spent his life decoding this globally life-invading value system. And while some of the criticism from some people regarding his syntax is valid, because he does tend to go overboard at times with sentences that kind of get carried away, and he finally decides to put a full stop on them because his depth of thought is very intense. His prose is very dense, and once you get used to it, it's fine. But when you're not used to it, it is very, very dense. So anyway, but while some of the criticism is valid, there are some critical concepts that have been arrived at through this decoding of what McMurtry calls the ruling value syntax, okay? So it's basically a syntax that's governing beneath people's recognition. And this is the challenge. What he's done is he's excavated our, excuse the intellectual language, presuppositions or assumptions, if you like. He's excavated them and laid the inner logic of them bare. So in short, most everything within the current social order has been reversed in meaning beneath recognition. And this is really important. He calls it the great reversal, which is a concept that works on multiple levels. And it's just something to be aware of, that when, you know, now that I understand this and I'm decoding this ruling value syntax in real time, the world becomes a bit of a different place, as it is for most of us RBEs, I'm sure, right? So, now, why the cancer model? I think it's really important to just quickly state this, because this idea of a cancer system scares a lot of people off, which is why they don't really tend to talk about it. In my view, it's critical to understand the cancer model for recovery. Now, it's not a provocative metaphor. It's an explanatory model. And as I said, some people, you know, even in the RBE movement say, oh, I'm not going to even think about that because it's too scary to contemplate. Unfortunately, well, in my view, it's the only model that I've seen that bridges across, and this is critical for everyone to understand, because it bridges across social, ecological, and organic domains. And this is something that's missing from a lot of RBE activists at the moment, is the organic side of the connection across the domains to bring the inner logic of recovery to the surface, and hence, you know, resolve the rising crises of our age. So basically, this part one, I'm just going to divide this into 3 parts. Part one's the biggest part, by the way. Just firstly, what I'll do for clarity, I've just done this. First, I'll give a very brief overview of the diagnostic history of the cancer system, something really important to be aware of. And secondly, I need to explain the cancer sequence. And this is a term or a concept that it's not McMurtry's concept, but you'll come to understand, if you're not already aware of this, why the concept of a sequence is really important to understand in respect of a structure of thought. And thirdly, I will take us through a journey of the Great Sickness and show how the social immune system is still mostly incoherent when it comes to the inner logic of recovery. And from this, you know, this value system disorder, I think we can call it, that we endure at the moment. So, yeah, so basically, the first edition of McMurtry's, by the way, he's been a professional philosopher working for about 45 years. But the first edition of the Cancer Stage of Capitalism was published in 1999. And it laid out a pretty compelling diagnosis by joining the dots across domains, as I said. Now, as we all know, probably, if you don't know who John McMurtry is, you might have seen him in Zeitgeist Moving Forward, Peter Joseph's 2011 film, which was published, of course, after the first edition, where basically what Zeitgeist Moving Forward did in the second section called Social Pathology, filmmaker Peter Joseph laid bare the general inner logic of the cancer system without naming it, But he basically laid out the general logic, especially the money sequence versus the life sequence, which I'll explain a little bit more as we move forward. This money sequence versus the life sequence is a really important understanding. And in 2013, John McMurtry published a second edition at request of the publisher, much expanded to include the 9/11 turn and all the 9/11 wars, which are life destructive, of course. People's lives don't have any value to this ruling value system. The second edition had a whole new first chapter connecting many of the dots. The chapter was called What is Capital? Which is a really important question I'd like everyone to think about. What is capital? It's really interesting when you start thinking about this. Excuse me. So basically, in the second edition, there was a diagnostic summary of degenerate trends. So basically, in short, what we have is a global macro cancer system working on 33 different levels of degenerate trends. So this is the systems thinking, the systems context that we're always talking about in the movement and in the RBE movement, Zeitgeist Movement, is joining the dots across domains. So John McMurtry's work is deep, what he calls deep structural life value analysis. And it is a system analysis, and it basically, I did a podcast recently where I actually laid bare all 33 trends of this cancer system. And basically, because I wanted an audio version of it, so I basically just read it out, performed it, if you like. The syntax for the degenerate trends is really important, the way he's laid this out. Now, no one's really tried to argue against this. It hasn't really been argued against. No one's really tried to argue against it because it's compellingly true. It's been thought through and it's been refereed. It's been scientifically refereed, medically refereed, and there really is no argument against it. The problem is he had to put the second edition out because everything he predicted in the first edition of 1999 was coming true, but it doesn't make any difference if people don't know it. So that's the problem. And knowledge, like he says, knowledge is really, it's really a knowledge war that we're in, and the dissemination of knowledge, which is what we're doing now, is really, and what the whole purpose of RBE learning, moving forward RBE learning network is really about, isn't it, Charlotte? Is actually learning, dissemination of knowledge and learning. So, I just think it's really, really, really important because basically this diagnostic summary of degenerate trends, what it does is it unifies the manifold and many level disorders that we are all aware of in many different aspects that are identified in isolation by what Buckminster Fuller called the specialization blinded professionals with the $25,000, $50,000 hats. It unifies them into a systemic and full spectrum account. And it reveals a set of macro system disorders all interlocked into one global system of life host degradation, depletion, and destruction. So, just as an aside, just really want to quickly point out, obviously, I think Charlotte's reading this book at the moment. I've just finished it. Peter Joseph's book, The New Human Rights Movement. Just want to show this here because of some of the trends, of course, just as a visual representation. Peter Joseph calls this the 7 nails. We're probably all aware of this if we're in the RBE movement on some level. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. All good. All good. Yeah. All good. So this obviously shows us that business as usual is not really an option, but this by no means is all the trends. Obviously, when we look at the organic level, and this is what's missing even from Peter's 7 nails, the organic level of, for example, non-contagious diseases that rising to the world's biggest killer, that are multiplying in direct systemic correlation to the system's money sequence growth. So basically, such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, we know this. Now, much lip service is paid from people within the normal sphere, if you like, to the fact that we've removed a lot of the old contagious diseases. We've reduced a lot of the contagious diseases through vaccines and so-called modern medicine, etc. Yet, isn't it interesting that these rising disease epidemics are usually blinkered out of the apologist arguments proclaiming all this, quote, social progress and so-called, and this is the most interesting one, rising standards of living. standards of living. I'll let you just think about that for a moment. So, you know, we all know this, but it's just the organic level is something that this is what the cancer model does. It ties it together. Now, obviously, there are many estimates as to the number of Earths we will need by particular years. I don't religiously hold on to any particular estimate, but this one's pretty shocking. We've all probably heard of it in the RBE movement. And while elite voices proclaim overpopulation as the cause of this, which McMurtry compellingly argues is a fallacy of common cause. Basically, it's really interesting that the exponentially multiplying money sequences with no committed life function are blinkered out as population rates halve and the damages still escalate. So it's really, really interesting. And I find this overpopulation conflation, this fallacy of common cause, you could liken it in truth to blaming your sore throat on your runny nose without recognizing flu as the common cause. Now, we currently use just a quick summary here. We currently use the annual output of the planet's resources in 8 months. The air, soil and water are cumulatively degrading and disappearing. My country, New Zealand's got 70% of its ecosystems now under direct threat. The climates and oceans are destabilizing without connection. And that's the key thing. You know, they talk about climate change, but they don't really talk about the dying oceans in the same sentence, do they? Species are becoming extinct at a spasm rate across continents. And with 2 men now owning more wealth than 30% of the New Zealand population, I'm just talking about my country for a moment, 2 men owning more money wealth, how else would a cancer system behave? So what I want to just quickly move on to now is the cancer sequence. So this is something really important. So cancer has 2 core characteristics of cancer, whether it be at the organic level in the body or whether it be a social cancer or a social pathology, which is what we're dealing with, obviously. Number one, it has no committed function to the life host. So there's absolutely no life coordinates in the growth of the cancer. And number 2, it's not recognized by the surrounding community. And this is the key thing as well. Now we know this because we all know kind of, you know, intuitively, I guess, what a cancer is in the body. But when you think about a cancer at the social level of life organization, which is what we're talking about here, it's not a provocative metaphor. We're talking about it's not like McMurtry's having an organic metaphor either. It's not an organic metaphor. It's not like he's seeing society as an organism. He's seeing it as a social life organization. And this is why the syntax that McMurtry uses is really important for recovery. And a lot of people diss his work, even in the RBE movements, diss his work because it's, quote, too complicated, when actually he spent 40 years decoding this system. You know, and you can argue against it if you want, but you got to actually listen to the argument first, right? So anyway, basically, it comes down to basically, I'm simplifying here, of course, but without going into a whole lot of detail, but basically it comes down to a war between the money sequence of value and the life sequence of value. Now, this was laid out in Peter Joseph's film, The Zeitgeist Moving Forward. He explicitly used these terms because he understood the importance of these terms. and when you understand what the cancer system is and what it's doing at every level of life organization, you understand the importance of these 2 sequences and the importance of distinguishing between these 2 sequences in respect of a structure of thought. And that's really, really, really important. So yeah, you know, it's really, you know, people in the RBE movement, that we like to simplify, and I understand why we do, when we say, oh, well, isn't it just about, I mean, I had a conversation with someone once and they said, oh, isn't it just about collaboration, Scott, and maybe, you know, access over property and collaboration over competition and you know, meeting human needs directly, and, you know, like, and that's all good, simple stuff. That's right. But it's the sequence understands really important, which will become clear as I go forward. So basically, just to break down the 2 sequences just really quickly to let everyone know, the money sequence of value, just to put it into symbology, there's different levels of how the money sequence can work, and some are more dangerous than others. But basically, we have money, and we use the money, and it's basically a sequence is a set of things that happen in a sequence. This happens, that happens, this happens, that happens. So this is the key thing, and this is what the people in the normal sphere are just not thinking on the systemic level of what their purchases are doing and what their investments, quote, investments are doing in a systemic nature in respect of life destruction. So basically, we have money and we use means of life to turn it into more money. So that's a basic money sequence. The second level would be money and means of life destruction, and we turn that into more money. You know, we destroy the ocean, we pollute the ocean, and we turn it into money. This is all logical, right? You know, it's a no-brainer really when you think about it, but we don't think about it in these terms. The third one is just the complete decoupling of, this is the real cancer sequence, is money, more money, more money. You know, it has no productive function at all. There's no life function at all. It's just money into more money into more money. This is the derivative moment, you know, that's exactly what the derivative moment is. Now, it's really interesting because we've got this trade, you know, these trade agreements, these so-called trade agreements, or what they really are, these TPP or the TISA or the TIPA or whatever you call them. They're a metastasis of the cancer system. So a metastasis is when you've got if I talk about the body, when you've got a cancer on one part of the body and it jumps, you know, to another part of the body, it spreads. So what these trade agreements are, they're just metastases of the cancer system. They are just jumping across continents, across borders, to basically turn everything on the planet into money as fast as we can. For, quote, investment returns, you know. So this is what I mean by everything's been reversed in the current order. Everything the politicians are talking about has been reversed in meaning beneath their recognition, because this economy abstraction was never connected to the planet from the beginning. Now, I know we know this, but, you know, it's when you put it into the context of cancer, it's really important. So the life sequence, let's just talk about the life sequence, and this is something that is just blinkered out completely, even by really well-meaning RBE advocates who still don't understand the importance of the need for a structure of thought that can facilitate the life sequence. So basically, the life sequence is very simple. We have a life host, I'm a life host. My body's a life host. The planet is a life host. The planetary life host. We all go through means of life. You know, we must drink water every day, and we must have nutritious food, and we must breathe every few seconds, and then we have more life as a result. Right? It's a sequence. So I have life, and I go through means of life, and I have more life. So it's very, very, very simple. It's like basic, you know, but it's not really talked about in those terms, because the means of life is excluded from all the calculus. Basically, all life capital has been erased from accounts long ago. It doesn't exist on the computer, on the digits on the screen. So it really comes down to, I'm jumping ahead here, but it really comes down to a war between money capital growth and life capital growth. So this is really, really what it's about, is that obviously money capital grows and life capital is not even in the equation. It's all been erased from accounts, but we do need to grow that. And this is the most interesting thing. So just got a quote from Daniel Schmachtenberger here, because it's really relevant. So I'm just going to read it really quickly. With the decentralizing nature of exponential technology, many actors, state and non-state, will have catastrophe levels of destructive power. This means war becomes obsolete or existential. Similarly, in the materials economy, competing for the extraction of scarce resources with exponential extraction capacity leads us to biosphere collapse very rapidly, and exponential information technology in a win-lose context that incentivizes hoarding useful information and spreading disinformation has already led to a post-truth world where it is nearly impossible to pass the intentionally withheld signal from the radically amplified noise, which means we are making increasingly consequential decisions informed by increasingly poor sense-making. It should be clear that all of these trends are both inexorably self-terminating and unavoidable in the current game theoretic environment. We are now finally at the verticalizing part of the exponential curve, where the tipping points to a system failure are in clear sight. technology extends human capacity and choice. Exponential technology means exponentially increasing ability to affect the world with our choices. If those choices are consciously or unconsciously causing direct or indirect harm, exponential technology means exponential destruction. In the win-lose context set by private ownership-based economics, harm-causing behavior of many types is incentivized. Win-lose game theory multiplied by exponential technology is existential. Exponential technology can't be put back in the bag, so we have to create a post-rivalrous world. Win-lose dynamics multiplied by enough power eventually become omni-lose-lose dynamics. We either figure out how to create an omni-win-win world, or we keep trying to win at win-lose and end up with an omni-lose-lose world. So most people in the RBE movement will be aware of this. Now, the ruling value mechanism, to summarize this, the ruling value mechanism basically is what is the organizing principle of what reproduces our life support, and it's cancerous. So what I mean by that is it's destroying more than it produces. So just think about that. As an earth management system, it's destroying more than it produces. So when politicians talk about productivity, I don't know what they think we're producing because it destroys more than it produces. We don't actually produce anything as a net output. So just pause on that for a moment. It's absolute insanity. Everything in the current social order has been reversed in meaning beneath recognition. And if we don't start to adjust our rhetoric to actually decode what these people are talking about, we don't have a future. And I'm not just talking about politicians, I'm talking about everyone. You know, even RBE advocates are still talking about productivity without making the life and death distinction. So endlessly, this is the premise of market theology, which is what it really needs to be called by at this point. Endlessly self-maximizing atomic cells, whether individuals or corporations, are believed to necessitate the best of possible worlds by an invisible hand of competition. Only money costs compute to the system. Life costs do not compute. And, quote, economic growth is consistent with predictably destroying all planetary life support systems. So what this means is that most of the public are in this, what McMurtry calls the invisible prison, okay, because they have the ruling value syntax that has been reversed in meaning is governing their perceptions beneath their recognition. And this is, and it's the very nature of our instituted thought processes. So we don't see it. And it took me years to see it. And it took me like a year of studying McMurtry's work before I finally got my head around it, because the depth of this disorder is profound. So basically what we're at now, and you probably can't see that last bit, but this is what I see in the RBE movement at the moment. And I'm not trying to put anyone down here, but I'm just generalizing for the sake of clarity. And that is that we've got, the war really is between money, capital. I mean, everyone knows that money is growing exponentially. It's not just the exchange, it's the exponential multiplication that makes it cancer-like, with no productive life function at all. So, but unfortunately in the RBE movement at the moment, no one's really talking about the inner logic of recovery in respect of the missing life coordinates, which are so self-evident once they're laid bare and once you understand them. But it takes a while to get to the understanding. So I call this war that we've got in the RBE movement at the moment, money, capital, growth versus free thinking dogma, ungrounded, unaccountable, unlife grounded, unlife accountable, free thinking dogma. So just to decode some of this ruling value syntax, freedom means no accountability to human and world life. What else could it mean? This is taboo to know, you're not allowed to even know this. Competition means competing to externalize all costs onto the lives of citizens and environments as fast as possible. Development means mass homicide by system starvation and ecocide. Productivity, as I said before, means producing homicidal goods for a cancer system that destroys more means of life than it produces. So just really quickly want to run through some of the different aspects to this disorder, because as we all know, these propagandists of money value, which is what John McMurtry calls the economists, I guess, just as an aside, anyone with a working mind cannot call a system that destroys more than it produces an economy by definition. It doesn't economize anything. It destroys more than it produces. In our RBE rhetoric, even when we're talking to people in the normal sphere, if we're not making the life and death distinction in respect of, we talk about the economy, but, it's management of a household, and we're destroying more in the house than we produce. It's not an economy, okay? So anyone out there still calling the system an economy in any of their rhetoric is reverse projecting, okay? They're reverse projections. They are reversing undeniable fact as ultimate justification. It's not an economy. These are the propagandists of money value, and we can see that we all know it started with Adam Smith, really, and he just introduced this term in parentheses, invisible hand, and it's mutated and metastasized so much that all these theories are all based upon the false assumptions, the genocidal false assumptions. So there's all these progressive economists, okay? So the problem is what even the the Nobel Prize winning economists, and I know some people in the RBE movement know this, or probably everyone in the RBE movement as well, but even the inner logic of this cancer system is built into the inner logic. It's the inner logic of the higher mathematics that you get all the Nobel Prizes for. They're all locked into it. So Amartya Sen, Elinor Ostrom, even Steve Keen. Steve Keen's a really interesting one because he talks about how these other guys on the previous screen that I just had, how they block out money, debt, and banks. But Steve Keen blocks out everything that makes our society livable. And so our problem has many levels, and it really is this pathology is really quite despairing, really. Although Steve does get into energy, and just on that note, there's a lot of people talking about degrowth, zero growth, and the anti-growth, the end of growth, or steady state. These are, in truth, all system cancerous constructs. So if we're talking about zero growth, what we're doing is life growth itself is blinkered out, a priori. Because basically, trees grow and food grows, basically these constructs are opposing life growth beneath recognition. And a lot of people in the energy movement are talking about, we need degrowth. Like, yes, we do need to shrink all the bullshit jobs and all that, absolutely, and everything, that all the homicidal commodities, of course. But the problem is without making by blinkering out life growth, we are erasing the life-death distinction, which in truth it's not a trivial blind spot. It makes all the difference between heaven and hell. So even at the critical level, our problem has many levels, but even at the critical level where people are rejecting this system, they really don't have any concept of a life coherent alternative, or even of what's wrong. And I know that's pretty, some people might say, oh, Scott, but actually this is the real problem that we face. So now, donut economics is really popular. So I wanted to talk about this today because it's really, really popular. And donut economics is an attempt to ground in life requirements. So this is critical for people to understand and start talking about, because a lot of people that like donut economics out there. And, while the RBEs probably don't see it as a solution or whatever, it's really important to understand what's wrong with it in the context of the cancer system. So it's an attempt to ground in life requirements without the life coherence principle, which I haven't got to yet, which I'll talk about, or the logical tools, okay? So she's a journalist, right? And journalists are trained not to decode the cancer system. So it's nothing against Kate Raworth. She's done a great job, but I call this donutism, because it's just basically another religion. And I'm going to explain why, so that everyone can understand why, because this is critical, because this understanding, you can use this understanding to decode some other stuff. So basically, I'm just going to quote John McMurtry here. You might not be able to see all that text, but I can. So John McMurtry commented on donut economics. So I could never take donut economics seriously because it adopted a junk food model of economics, which by its design was hollow at the core. To strike straight to its core meaning and graphic presented on page 38, we find all the nice cliches of the day, like peace and justice, gender equality, social equity, and the basics of food, water, health, education, energy, etc. This is fine and far better than the dominant economics that is a form of liquid mechanics, which is in principle life blind. Moreover, it does touch base with the universal human life necessities I have defined and spelled out in my work since the mid-1990s. But sadly, and this is critical, with no criteria to tell any of them from their masked opposites. And this is what I've been talking about the whole time. For example, there's no criteria to tell food from junk food, masked as food, or peace and justice in defined reality, distinguished from what is called peace and justice by corporate governments or even identity activists. So, to carry on, McMurtry says, this clarity of meaning is what is needed most of all to know what we are talking about. Principled bases and concepts of understanding defined to precisely rule out their phony forms and claims, which are typically opposite what they appear as. This is where the great reversal is really important to understand, because again, everything's been reversed in meaning. I would even say there is not one problem we face as a species which is not permitted, furthered, and masked by nice-sounding concepts without any life-grounded meaning or even elementary criterion. Unless we know, for example, what education, healthcare, and networks of information mean, which is central to donor economics, against their many false pretenders, we are literally lost. It may feel good and easy to chant slogans together, and there are many who enjoy that, but it will play into the hands of the system for which the only truth is what sells for a private profit. And they use all these undefined slogans to do it. For example, healthcare may be claimed to be free operations and prescriptions for the public or pay up, but there are no life standards, even now, to ensure in either case that they enable rather than disable people's life capacities through time. Provide for every person's needs is a wonderful project alive since the 19th centuries, to each according to his needs, which Charlotte talked about in her article the other day. But unless we know what these needs or necessities truly are, we are again happily lost in our promos with no definite meaning. That is the mind fuel of the ongoing disaster. So, getting on to that point. So this is really important to go through this today, because basically, you know, this is really stuck. This from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs. But again, he's not. Probably the most hated critic of capitalism was Ewing Lifeline himself, and this is how deep our disorder is, because you know we know the century of hate against this man, and he still doesn't have the full picture, you know. So these are the most popular Marxists alive today: Richard Wolff and David Harvey. They have no life value anchor, compass, base, or measure in their understandings. When you listen to them, they are driven fully as Marx was. Marx's ground is productive force development. If you're interested in learning more about the decoding of this, because all of Marx's work has been subject to devastating regrounding, life grounding analyses. McMurtry's McMurtry's read everything Marx has ever written, and written probably more than Marx. A great book called The Structure of Marx's Worldview was written in the 1970s by McMurtry. The Structure of Marx's Worldview. And also, there's a great article on my website called Reading Capital as Life Grounded, 150 years later. So it's all by McMurtry. Really, really interesting to get into the base superstructure theory of what Marx's worldview. But again, this is all taboo this is all unspeakable with these people, because they could never comprehend that they're part of the cancer system. And even, you know, Richard Wolff, you know, he's got a lot of fantastic rhetoric on a lot of issues we're talking about. He's been talking about you know, technological unemployment and all that, but no life ground, you know, and it's really sad. It's not their fault, by the way. You know, I'm not saying it's their fault. It's just this is just diagnosing what the problem is. Then we move into what Peter Joseph calls the techno-capitalist apologists. So we're all aware of these people. You know, I call them positionally determined, because basically they've been determined by their position to it's a sequence, you know, it's just a sequence. They're just going to follow their sequence of understanding, and they'll never find the life ground. They'll never understand what's missing in their rhetoric and in their understanding. And they're probably all really well intentioned as well. You know, it's really, really, really sad. Then these sort of people, you know, we've got, I mean, even Chris Hedges doesn't decode it because, again, journalists are trained not to. So Noam Chomsky, the great linguist, you know, who reformed linguistics, doesn't have a life value anchor, compass, base, and measure in any of his theories. It's really sad. Guy McPherson, who's, you know, traveling the world telling everyone we're going to be dead in 10 years, advocating to take our foot off the accelerator, by the way. I'm not putting him down. I'm just saying he does say, even though he says there's nothing we can do, he does say take your foot off the accelerator. He doesn't have a compass, and he's a biologist. So it's really interesting. Jeremy Rifkin, you know, we all know this. Now, we'll get into people like Alan Watts, of course, the late great Jacques Fresco, and Buckminster Fuller. Now, these guys, you know, a lot of people call them the techno-utopianists, which is, you know, cute, affectionate term. I don't call them that, but a lot of people have. Excuse me. They are locked into the same sort of, at the core fundamental level, unfortunately, really, and it's you know, I'm not putting anyone down to say this, but really locked into a form of base superstructure theory. McMurtry has written extensively on this in relation to Marx, as I said before, but it does apply as well to the same sort of rhetoric. There's expressions and there are expressions paid, like there is in the RBE movements as well. There are expressions paid to the life ground, and there are it's alluded to, but it's not defined and it's not grounded in, and that's the most important thing. So this is really, and all of this really, it all comes down to what we can call technological determinism, and this is an ancient problem. Okay, so it's not like this is new or anything. It's an ancient problem. We are life blind as a species, and we have no collective agency in our you know, I'm not talking on the individual level here. I'm talking on the collective level as atomic agents. We don't have a collective agency built into our social system. Now, I know we kind of know this intuitively if we're involved in the RBE movement, but I'm just trying to take us to a next level of understanding for recovery here. So, obviously, we have a lot of groups out there. There's a lot of them. I didn't put them all here, but I just wanted to show you some of the groups, of course, and as you know, that you're part of them. Many organizations. So, but apart from the Zeitgeist, I mean, I've looked extensively, I might have missed something, but apart from the Zeitgeist movement, and I mean, Peter Joseph talked about the life ground in Zeitgeist Moving Forward. It's in Zeitgeist Movement Defined. I can't find in Venus Project materials, Money Free materials, or the World Summit. I know that's a bit of a different sort of organization. Anything to do with the life ground, as in grounded in. And where is the defined life coherent compass to guide against delusions and technological determinism? So because of this, I had John McMurtry on my podcast. This is why I got him on my podcast, because I wanted to talk to him about this. And he calls what we're in at the moment a transitional money cell carcinoma. Okay, so he basically sees the problem that's happening, of course, like we're all starting to see now, is that we're not talking about what we really need to be talking about at the fundamental level in respect of life coherence. So John McMurtry said on my podcast in February, we have all sorts of new paradigms coming out now. The positive side that people are seeing, like Zeitgeist, etc., who are thinking, oh, we'll get rid of money. They don't realize that money is a much deeper problem. This eco-genocide can go into credit systems where there is no money at all, and that is going to be even more dangerous and even more debt creating. So all of the paradigms are not only false in their promise, but they're all also not life grounded, not life capital grounded. So moving forward. So had a mini summit, I believe, in January, which was very fantastic. And I loved hearing all about this. I've done 2 podcasts with some of these people, including Charlotte. And it was just fantastic. And this is all fantastic stuff, by the way. And I know the World Summit is not there to tell people what to do and what to believe. I get that. I understand that. I understand the purpose of the organization. But just to show you how deep this cancer system goes, it's really, really despairing, because I see this acronym that came out, and it's all fantastic stuff. You know, it's all fantastic. But is the word life there at all? Can you see it anywhere? It's really interesting what the cancer system is doing to, and it's our instituted thought processes. This concept of life is just taken for granted as a priori. It's just something that is a given. Life is not an economic category, nor is life means at any level. And if it's not a category, we can't calculate we can't calculate cumulative gain over time of life support without loss. And manage life support systems. So again, I'm not putting anyone down here. I'm just showing as an example of what the cancer system is doing, even within the RBE movement, in respect of what we're not talking about. There's no life ground in here. So life is often, as I said before, it's often expressed or it's appealed to, but where is it grounded in? And it's really, really really important. So just really quickly, there's some other models. I want to just quickly talk about Maslow's hierarchy to dismiss some myths about this. McMurtry's criterion of needs and full list of human universal life necessities are nothing to do with a Maslow hierarchy. Also, you know, Maslow doesn't have a criterion to distinguish anything from its masked opposites like donut as well. But again, and there's this other thing, this value chains. There's all these wonderful constructs, okay? Robert Schramm sent me this thing as well, because he was concerned that I was pushing some form of dogma. And I'm just laying this out because it's really important. What McMurtry's put forward here in respect to the primary axiom is not a dogma, okay? It's not. It's an attempt to try to impose a committed life function into this ruling value system, which we're all part of. You know, we're all this lovely, fantastic structure that Robert's got here is completely life blind to the core. So, just to almost close this section is just to quote McMurtry, any diagnostic process of elimination can arrive at only conclusion in the light of all the system trends and pathways of life and life support destruction. Nothing but a cancer system can explain the fixation into ever-growing life host devastation. So really it comes down to the ruling group mind, which we're all part of, versus the need to install objective, accountable, and grounded life coherent understanding. So who decides? This is part 2. Who decides? This is always the ultimate question that no one can answer. And this is what has stumbled our evolution. Who decides the better system? What principle of life development can we all agree upon? What common ground or standard works across domains? Contemporary philosophers have so failed that they variously conclude that there is no such thing as a universal value or moral standard. Again, not living life is recognized as a universal and moral good. It's very interesting. There are only contingent worldviews, values, perspectives, diverse languages and cultures, never any unifying principle of good or evil across them. There, again, plenty of appeals and expressions of equality. Common ground is a common one. You know, we talk about common ground. We don't talk about a common life ground, but that's what it is. Living in harmony with planetary ecology. You know, there's lots of appeals. So by default, only money value propaganda and unaccountable free-thinking dogma reigns. So again, I just want to stress, everything in the current social order has been reversed in meaning.
Oh my God.
Are you still there?
Yes, we are. We're listening to every word.
Oh, good. Sorry, I wasn't sure. So many of the terms most terms out there have been equated the opposite meaning in normal usage. Okay, and this is a real problem. To me, this is one of the most critical things to understand for recovery.
Scott, one thing,
Yeah.
screen, we don't see your screen anymore. Did you switch it off?
Oh, hang on. Let me just try. Sorry, hang on. No, I didn't, but
Yeah,
host disabled attendee screen sharing.
No, I didn't. Let's see.
Oh.
Try it again.
It's not letting me. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, I clicked it by mistake. Can you try to share it again?
No, it just keeps saying that same message. Host has.
Oh dear.
why that is. Sorry.
No, it's not your fault. Okay. You should be able to do it now.
Oh, yep, all good. Thank you. You're wonderful.
Yes, I'm a computer genius.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. So, can you see me still? Can you see my screen? Sorry.
Yes, we can.
Okay, all good. Nice. So, again, it's a ruling value system. So this is something, someone said to me the other day, oh, we don't need a new system. We can just use the existing system. It's not really a system problem. And I just really want to make this really clear too, because I don't know a lot of us know this, but some people in the RBE movement are now saying that we don't have a system disorder. And we have a ruling value system. Basically, the system is a value system. So it's in our heads, right? It's not just the digits on the screens, and it's not just the interaction that we have with the cards and the paper and the little old pieces of metal. It's ridiculous what we're still doing, isn't it? But it's a value system disorder, and it's a reward reinforcement system. So it basically, the digits on screens are connected to people's mindsets. It's a real pathology, and if we're going to manage a planet, if we're talking, this is really what we're talking about, right? Is a system of earth management, which is what the best that money can't buy, what Jacques Fresco has always proposed. You have to have an algorithmic approach to life support management. It's a macro cancer. So people out there that are telling me, oh, Scott, we don't need a macro algorithm for life support. You have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm not trying to put you down. It's just that the level of disorder here in respect of what the instituted thought processes are doing, it's really, really, really hard. So no one decides. That's the whole point. Like, it's a completely objective matter, okay? So there's no argument. There's nothing to disagree about. We've all already agreed on these principles. We just don't know them. And this is the most interesting thing, is that, again, McMurtry hasn't invented anything. He's just pointing out what's basically already there. But people will deny this through and through. People will say, oh, no, it's not relevant. What your document, Scott, you've got, this axis of 40 years work is not relevant. But they're all drinking water though, aren't they? They've already decided that they're living in accord with the principle. They just don't know it. They're all drinking water. They're all eating food. So the point is, my argument is, a viable system of earth management must enable rather than disable life capacity without loss and with cumulative gain over generational time. So I repeat that. A viable system of earth management must enable rather than disable life capacity. That's the key, life capacity. The capacity to live, the capacity of our life support systems to provide our means of life without loss. And this is what's missing, without loss and with cumulative gain over time. This is the capital moment, over generational time. Now, the viable systems model, just in case anyone doesn't know, is from Stafford Beer, 1972. He was a critical influence when it came to cybernetics. It's really important if you want to learn more about this sort of thinking. Life capital. Okay, so life capital is the missing unifying alternative. This is the unifying alternative that's still unseen. It is life capital. It's cumulative gain over time. Now, I know what some people say. They go, oh, but so hang on, I'll just define it. So life capital is the wealth of means of life or life goods that produce more without loss and then cumulative yield through time. Now, I want to explain why, because we do want to address the cancer system, right? I want to explain why, because heaps of people I talk to get really emotional about this idea of using the word capital, and I want to explain why McMurtry is using it basically in his decoding. It's the only word in any language that can facilitate all four moments of understanding. So again, it's life wealth, not money wealth, life wealth that produces more life wealth without loss and with cumulative gain over time. There's basically four moments of understanding. It's a sequence. And this is where it's the life sequence. So and also it's already implicit in the architecture of modern human thought. It can bridge into the current paradigm very easily once people are aware of this. It's all measurable, quantifiable. It's completely objective matter. So I know a lot of people don't like the word life capital, but this is the unifying alternative, and it applies to all domains: social, ecological, and organic. So finally getting to the meat here, the reason, we've still got some time, Charlotte? Have I still got time?
No, I'm going to turn you off.
Oh.
No, I'm joking. No, go ahead. We got started a bit late, so, I think about 10 more minutes. And,
okay, all good. So the reason for the primary axiom of value was to find a life ground of meaning that could be relied upon against all sophistries and slogans, all fads and cultural conceits, and especially all philosophies of the past governing us, which are in truth without any defined universal life value base or compass to guide against delusions. The universal human economy was written for the same reason, to define the complete set of human life needs and no others, with no conceivable distortion, neither too narrow nor too broad in any circumstance, to release us from the endless bullshit, ill or well-meaning in motive. This is the problem. We're all so well-intended here. It's an anchor. That's all it is. It's just an anchor, okay? It goes along with all of your other social implications. So it's like what the World Summit's trying to do, on one level. The World Summit made it really clear, and it's a great concept, is they didn't want to suck up the identity of all the other groups. It was about getting the groups together and saying, come on, guys, let's just get together and have a meeting and try and implement a new system, The primary axiom and the universal human economy is basically the missing life coordinates of the cancer system. And I just really quickly, we'll go through this really quickly, but because basically, just if anyone doesn't know what an axiom or postulate is a statement that is taken to be true to serve as a premise or starting point for further reasoning and arguments, right? So very quickly, I just want to lay the logic of the axiom out, because it's I had to do all the intro to get the understanding why it's so important. So it's as simple as it could be, right? And some people think it's complicated, and I suppose it is in a way, because again, the pathology it's such a disorder, but actually it's actually quite simple, really. So X is value if and only if, and to the extent that X consists in or enables a more coherently inclusive range of thought, feeling, and action than without it. And conversely, X is disvalue if and only if, and to the extent that X reduces, disables, or destroys any range of thought, experience, and action. Converse is really important. McMurtry is a genius, really, because none of these words are arbitrary, okay? We have to talk about this. We have to converse at the social level of life organization. By the way, converse means opposite as well, but it also means we have to talk about it. So nothing's arbitrary here, okay? When because we're dealing with a social order where everything, or 98% of what we talk about has been reversed in meaning beneath recognition. This is why the primary axiom is so important. This is all assumed, by the way. As I said, he's just pointing out what's already there. The three fields of value: thought, felt side of being, and action. Again, some people think this is complicated. You could change the second one to feelings if you want, but basically, this is basically the three fields of value, and these three fields of value include all that is of value in life. And if you really think about there's no argument with that. Governed by the goodwill, which is to realize these three as one to realize the primary axiom, and the true, which is progressive consistency with the primary axiom, or what he calls the life coherence principle, as I talked about before. So symbolically expressed, it can be put into a sequence of actually an algorithm. It's all measurable, quantifiable. Gains, this is really important too, gains or losses in life capacity are as objective as the laws of biology and medicine. Okay, what's missing is the collective agency to manage our life support systems. But it's a completely objective matter. And this is the cybernetic loop, which looks surprisingly like the employer-employee consumer model. But basically, this is what's called the cybernetic loop. This isn't part of McMurtry's model, but I just put it in here because basically, this is exactly what it is. Again, completely objective, quantifiable. Very, very quickly, the unlimited validity of the primary axiom across time, place, and domains is shown by its self-evidence, insofar as its denial is nonsensical. Universality across all domains and issues of value judgment, insofar as there is no domain of value to which it does not apply. Presupposition, again, that's an assumption. Presupposition and value judgments and conflicts across domains. Objectivity, this is something a lot of people have problem with. A lot of people that have been conditioned to believe that subjectivism is relevant when it comes to life support. Objectivity, insofar as its value is independent of anyone's recognition. Impartiality, insofar as it, like I said at the beginning, it cuts against or privileges no common life interest. Completeness, insofar as it includes every life form, domain, or change to ill or better and distinct or holistic comprehension. Sovereignty, in that it overrides any other value in cases of conflict. Measurable in degrees of value, insofar as greater or lesser ranges of thought, felt being, and action can each and all be decided from any given, and this is the key thing, reference body of value. There's a lot of reference bodies out there that aren't having any life calculation applied to them at the moment, and all they need is an objective, quantifiable life calculation to bridge across domains. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to remove these rising disease epidemics. And contingent pattern of long-term evolutionary and historical development. Again, he hasn't actually invented anything, he's just decoded. So very, very quickly, just to wrap up for a moment, the primary axiom is raised in the world by the following complete set of universal human life necessities, and the axiomatic criteria measures of life, goods, capital, and efficiency, which govern the universal human economy, which is the missing alternative paradigm. You can call it what you like, by the way, but the logic is pretty clear. In normative terms, these principles govern as life ground ethics, including moral theory and aesthetics on collective as well as individual levels. In legal and policy terms, if you're having a legal system, this is the thing that can bridge into the current model. They provide the framework of assessing the validity and legitimacy of any law. In social contract terms, they constitute the LVOA covenant of life on earth, to prevail over all conditions of ruling system or habit, disabling life coherent realization of the goodwill and social group or individual action. Now, I don't have time to go through all the principles, but they are documented. But basically, there's 7 principles, okay? And this is the universal human economy, which is just something that sits alongside the primary axiom. Just quickly want to point out the universal human life necessities, which is what's missing. Again, the complete list. Obviously, we have our atmospheric means of life, we have bodily means of life, we have home means of life, environmental means of life, caring means of life. We have the educational, recreational means of life, vocational means of life, and of course, self-governing choice, and each's enjoyment consistent with each's provision. So if there was any phrase the phrase that made Marx famous was, to each according to his blah, 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 blah. If there's any phrase that will make McMurtry well known as this one, self-governing choice and each's enjoyment consistent with each's provision. But it comes at the end of the list because unlike with Marx, the needs here are defined. They're objective, they're all quantifiable and measurable. So each principle has a converse as well, of course, which is the opposite, which determines enabling versus disabling. So there's also the efficiency principle, just very quickly. The efficiency principle is really important as well. And it's as simple as it could be, but it's so important because these 3, and McMurtry talked about this on my podcast, actually broke this one down in his own words. This is really important because obviously we know this intuitively, but to have it all defined is really important. Ecological efficiency, obviously, is to reduce externalities and all that. It's really clear. But the physical input-output efficiency is kind of what we're talking about when it comes to, mechanization and automation to increase efficiency and all that. It's an input-output thing. And the human development efficiency, which is probably the most important, is, and this is something that's completely different than the current order, is capability development of productive agents enables more life goods, lifetime and or life range choices than before. So this is what we're talking about. Human development efficiency is the automation of labor, freeing us time to have more life range choices than before, right? True human development efficiency is exactly what we're talking about in RBE. Right, all good. So very, very quickly, just about there. Again, it's an anchor, okay? It's an anchor. It's really important. Life capital is an anchor. I just want to make this really clear. In the current order, even in the RBE movement, life capital remains without a name. So we haven't got a thought structure being talked about that can facilitate cumulative gain over time without loss of life support. And the big terra incognito of philosophy and economics is that collective life capital doesn't even exist. And we have a real problem in respect of managing our life support systems, because obviously the universal human life necessities have to be managed at the collective level as well. It's not just the individual level. And this is the problem with the atomic agents of diseconomics or market theology. And just very quickly, this missing life collective agency, in this evolutionary reset, the rules are as simple as they are self-evident once seen. So there are always, number one, life value regulators from start to finish. Number two, production of more life value capacity through generational time. 3, life value measure to tell greater from lesser in any domain by margins of life capacity loss or gain. 4, cumulative life gain towards the organizing goal. And the meta principle that the more coherently inclusive any decision or action is in enabling life capacities, the better it always is for collective life capital and the world. So we talk about common ground, socioeconomic equality, critical mass, public health, but we aren't talking about life capital in respect of the need to grow life support cumulatively over time without loss. And that's the critical thing. And making the good and bad distinction, you know, because in the current model, every priced commodity is called a good. Even objective bads priced for sale are called a goods. And then it's set into mathematical disconnect and closed off to disconfirmation by any facts of the world. And that's my presentation. So sorry if it took a little bit long, but I hope that made sense.
Yeah, that was brilliant, Scott. Thank you so much. I'm just writing something you said down because I want to remember it. Okay.
Do you want me to stop sharing my screen, or?
Yeah, we can open up now the meeting for questions or comments. So if there's anyone that would like to get started, otherwise I've got 6 sheets of paper full of questions. So anyone like to get started?
I would.
Yes, no.
It's a quick question and hopefully a quick answer. On the middle of your presentation, by the way, the brilliant presentation, my congratulations. You talked about other lives. I don't recall it because I didn't take notes. But those other lives you were talking about, you're referring to have kids, something like that?
Other lives?
Yes. Other lives, you're talking about other people, or?
Oh well, this is the key thing with life capital and life capacity and life support systems. It doesn't privilege any species over any other species. Is that what you mean? Am I talking about other humans or other species? Is that what you're talking about? Is that what you mean? So,
no,
pardon me if I misinterpret your question.
Yes, I think you gave me the answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So life capital, collective life capital is really about managing life support systems and managing ecosystems. So can I just quickly say, even ecological economics misses the point, because ecological economics doesn't distinguish between plantations for pulp, say pulp plantations, or fisheries for food, and living ecosystems, because life is not an economic category. And if we don't have life as a category in respect of our conversation and calculating it and calling it life, we're not going to solve this ancient problem. So I hope that makes sense. It's not. This is not just human centric. This is all. This,
yeah. The point.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Great. That is such an essential point, also about the whole axiom of life, that it really gets to the most universal element that there is. And for me, that was what for me just so important. That was so important about it. Anyone else with a question? Yes, Yuri.
Just talk about one. Yeah. By what you just said, Scott, does that mean that this proposal or this view is not human-centric, let's say? It's life by itself, let's say, as long as we have a life supporting system, even if it's human on Earth, and if it's growing, it's, life itself, it's good. Or is it human-centric, and I kind of missed the point?
Well, it basically, there's two parts to it. So there's the primary axiom, which is absolutely nothing to do with humans at all. Really. Well, I mean, it does have thoughts, feeling, and actions, but all sentient creatures have, thought, feelings, and actions. I mean, if we believe that sentient creatures have thought, feelings, and actions, right? But the universal human economy was written because we are humans on a planet with a diseconomy, with an anti-economy. I call it a consumption waste machine, miscalled an economy. We're miscalling it, and we need to stop calling it an economy. So he wrote the universal human economy because we are humans that need to have an economy, or need to have a system to provide our life support. So it's a life coherent universal, and it applies to RBE, it applies to a money system at the moment. If we could implement it tomorrow, it applies to everything. So yeah, I guess, but the axiom itself, in respect of enabling or disabling life capacity, can be applied, and because it's relevant to all domains. So as I said, it's social, ecological, and organic domains. And when I say organic domains, I'm talking about, I'm a human, I'm a life host, I have a life, and I go through means of life, but so do animals. Any species out there goes through means of life, and we have to manage the ecosystems, or we have to make sure that the ecosystems flourish. And so really what it is the primary axiom is about, it's only a 4-page document, by the way. He's boiled it down. It's taken him so long to bloody just arrive at this document where he can say it covers all domains. Basically, it's been medically refereed and scientifically refereed, and basically, it has the answer to any question. So this is the claim. The claim is that you can pose any question you want to this 4-page document. It's like 42, right? It's 42. Does that make sense?
Only if are you talking that 42? Isn't that reference from Hitchhiker's Guide or something?
Yeah,
like that?
yeah. The answer to life, something, and everything.
But yeah, this is an international audience, Scott. You've got to be a little bit more explicit on that. Sorry,
even I tell you what, even and McMurtry writes about this. Even physics, so-called theories of everything, don't have life inquiry. It's really interesting. What's being blinkered out here by the silo thinking and the technical specialization, the specialization blind to professionals. It's really sad. So yeah, no, but great question. It's not just it's not just human centric, but it is. We're humans, and we can use it, but it's definitely to enable life capacity for all species.
Yeah, for me, this was also the most, what was so brilliant about this theory when I read about it. And I realized that this is actually an explication of what Jacques Fresco talked about in that holistic model. This is merely the algorithm
Yeah, that's
that
right.
makes this holistic model possible. And that's why I just got so excited about it. It's, as you mentioned in your presentation, you know, redesigning society is not just an issue of people doing their best and getting rid of money. You know, we're going to have some serious structures and some serious systems in place. And I know that there are several people, several organizations that are working on these structures, but I think really, as you say, that life system, that life grounding is absent. And I would like to just respond to what you also mentioned, also with relation to the World Summit, which, as you also pointed out, is not actually a group. But even in the explication of the principles, life isn't explicitly named. And
no, that's interesting.
It's such a collective human. It's like having blinders. Life is
it's a blind spot. Yeah, and this is, and he, you know, and I mean, McMurtry first wrote this this diagnosis for a public health journal in 1995, actually 4 years before the first book. And you know, he was coming to this realization of what the problem was around us, you know, and it really is structurally our social construct that's capsizing. You know, everyone's rearranging the deck chairs. It is structurally life blind in respect of, and I'm not talking on the individual level, because sane individuals, you know, like you and me and all the people here probably, sane individuals will do everything they do. They will make it a committed life function. In fact, we can describe our lives like that, right? There's nothing that you do that isn't a committed life function. And if it's not a committed life function, then you don't do it. So this is how you can apply the principle and it's changed my life completely, because it changes what you eat, it changes what you do, you know, it really, and how you treat people, and it really is a guiding principle, and your own life capital in your own lives, you know, in respect of what you own. Does it serve you? Does it serve and enable your life capacity, or does it disable it? You know, and so it works on the individual level and the collective level. So I hope that makes sense. It's not.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I was recently Friday night, you know, nothing to do, and I was skimming around Netflix, and I saw that they had a documentary or a film about Nikola Tesla.
I watched that the other week. Yeah.
and what you're talking about with McMurtry, it's a little bit the same thing about how Tesla was able to come up with the alternate current. You know, it's actually so simple, but because of the box that everybody was thinking in at the time, they could not solve that problem. It's like, you know, Einstein coming up with relativity or all of these things. You know, you have to get out of somehow that conditioned box. And that's another thing that you really brought out in your presentation about how it is really necessary, because we all have been conditioned in this way of thinking. So we really need some kind of objective application that can be used. Richard, I'm glad to see that you were able to join us. Did you have anything you wanted to ask?
Good morning. Hi, Scott. How are you? Thanks, Charlotte.
Hey, Richard. How long have you been there, Richard? I didn't even see you.
About half an hour. I thought it started at 7 o'clock our time, Scott. Sorry, mate.
Okay.
So I've missed the first half, but great to see so many faces here. Well done. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Scott, we've been talking about this for ages now, and you're going to come and stay with me soon, aren't you? So we're going to we're going to have some good time to really. I've got snow out here. You need it, mate.
Good on you.
It's freezing. Yeah, it's fantastic presentation, and I think it's really great that Scott's kind of consolidated McMurtry's work for us, you know, because it's obviously pivotally important that we get this right, you know, going forward. This is massive. But the point, I guess, at which Scott and I have kind of differed to date is that I feel that this is going to be addressed almost automatically by the voluntary structure that we'll have after the money's gone. And I mean, it's you know, it's really important that we understand it, that it's there written down and that somebody's worked it out. But I think the average person in the street will do it automatically because of the voluntary structure of society after money. And in as much as we already have life cycle analysis, we have references to the biosphere, to human limitations, to natural limitations. You know, these things are quite widely measured, at least now, but the money system prevents us from respecting those measurements that we've taken, because at the end of the day, you've got to make a profit or you're out. And so I feel that this is, I think Scott's managed to get a step ahead of everybody and we're still kind of catching up in that Scott's got to the final equation, if you like. That's the final material that we're going to end up referring to. But to the average person in the street, they don't need to worry about this, because this is where they'll end up anyway. It's the natural conclusion of what we're doing. And I guess for me, when I'm talking to the public, this is too heady. You know, it's too sophisticated language. And you know, most of my experience has been talking to very ordinary people in very ordinary places. And if I start talking, you know, more than one new word per paragraph, and they start to glaze over, you know, and most people just don't think that much. You know?
Yeah, but Richard, if I could just break in.
Please, yeah.
This is actually maybe you're actually citing one of the reasons why it's so important to have it in place. I think one of the things that Scott said, which maybe is overlooked, you know, we talk in the RBE about, you know, reducing shitty jobs and getting rid of crappy goods. So we're degrowthing, but there's no really plan, as far as I know, or no way to the alternative growth. So for instance, okay, the whole thing about food, for instance, under capitalism, they talk about how there are rising standards of living because more people are able to eat food. But in America, the poorest sections of society are eating crap, okay? And that's basically because the life value is not entered into that equation. The fact that they're putting something in their mouths is not equated to the value it has in sustaining or reducing life. So because a large population, oh, is that a cute little new, is that a rat? A guinea pig. Hello, little RBE guinea pig.
No, it's a rat. It's a rat.
Okay. Hello, RBE rat. So it's basically because a lot of people, they don't know what choices are life supporting, that because there is this discrepancy also of wealth, of education, all this stuff, that something explicit like this really has to be factored in. I see Yuri wants to respond to this, if that's okay with you, Richard. I cut you off, but yeah, okay. Yuri?
Yeah, I just want to compliment that really the system we have, it promotes that kind of behavior. It's not like it is an education problem, but the system rewards that kind of behavior. People are not bad, you know, they're like CEOs are not bad. They're not evil trying to kill people. They make these crappy products. I mean, not necessarily. Some of them might be, but not necessarily. They're not doing that because of that reason. They're doing it because it's profitable and it's rewarding to them. And they've learned that it's, you know, it's okay to do it. It's not a big deal. And it's profitable. It's rewarding to their lives. They can, you know, send their kids to college. It's rewarding to people. Just like every single behavior we express even the poorest, we talk about the richest all, but the poorest are also exhibiting. You're not away from the system. So really, the underlying structure, the mechanism is promoting the behavior. So you have to change the mechanism. So then education, but really, going back to what Charlie said, by having that system, there's no need anymore. It becomes obsolete to have that kind of behavior that harms people, So it just doesn't make sense. You gain nothing from that. You're just wasting your time. So if we follow, something like this proposal of a mechanism that's based on physics, providing for human needs and life and all that, it becomes obvious. We just make a system that improves people's lives, say, and then there's no need to harm people making crappy products. It's just a waste of time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Can I? Yeah. So I completely agree. So I completely agree with Richard, and absolutely. On one level, so that that's one thing to think about, is that like I said in the presentation, this pathology, which is what it is, and I'm sorry if that's a big word for some people, but it's you've got to think on a new level now. For some of us, if we're trying to implement the RBE, which I think is what we're trying to do, then we have to take a systems approach to Earth management, which requires life support systems. See, the man on the street isn't going to be there if he doesn't have food to eat in the morning from a life support system, from a production system. And we're talking about life standards in production. Okay, it's quite simple, basic stuff. It's nothing to be scared of, and Richard's right. Not every person on the street needs to know about this, but we do if we're implementing the RBE, because we have to implement a system of life support systems. And basically, I agree with you guys when you say once we get rid of money and all that, that the reward reinforcement mechanism, which is we'll have an opposite one that will serve us rather than what it does at the moment. I agree with you completely, but we still have to manage life support systems. So what's brilliant about this algorithm, or this axiom, or the universal human economy, whatever you want to call it, life capital, is it can be implemented into the current model now, and it can be implemented into the new system. See, there are life capital shifts that could be done overnight if the politicians knew what was required for our survival. And it's knowledge and public action. The real war is knowledge. It's a knowledge war. And so it's the fact that we don't know what we need to do. As I said before in the presentation, quite carefully, I did it very carefully, the inner logic of recovery from the cancer system follows from the logic of the problem. I don't know of any other explanatory model other than the cancer model that bridges across social, ecological, and organic domains. Maybe there's another one, but if again, the cancer model's brilliant because it's about life, and as I said in the presentation, how else would a cancer system behave other than the way it's behaving? All the trends are one way.
Yeah, before I let Yuri ask one more question, I just wanted to say, Scott, you said at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that a lot of people sort of reject that metaphor of cancer, but I was thinking it's not all that different than the metaphor of the cockroach that Agent Smith uses in The Matrix. It's the same sort of thing, So maybe we should just talk about cockroach capitalism.
Yeah. We like to avoid the diagnosis, which again has been it hasn't been disconfirmed since 1999. As I said, the argument's been thought through. It's compellingly true. No one's really tried to disconfirm it. But here we are, what is it? 20 years later, 19 years later after the diagnosis, 2 editions, and we're still scared to talk about it because no one wants to think about cancer. But if we have the cure, which is RBE, a life coherent RBE, because an RBE that's not life coherent is not. See, they're not resources; they're living ecosystems, and they have to be. It's a resource-based economy. It's a form of technological determinism without a life value anchor, compass, base, or measure. It's just a This is the problem. If we just talk about a resource-based economy, this is why Peter Joseph knew, and this is why he renamed it natural law resource-based economy. He was bridging across social domains because he knew about the life game, because he studied McMurtry's work and he put it into Zeitgeist moving forward. So yeah, sorry about that.
It's okay. And I wanted to say something else, but I'm making Yuri wait so long, I'm going to give the floor to him. Yeah, Yuri.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's kind of a true question, but I wanted to comment on this before. I also have a problem with the name resource-based economy, if I may comment on that, because it's very specific. In the name itself, it gives a clue that it's a resource-based economy. It's just about the economy. It doesn't implement a system. It talks nothing about technology. How do you implement this? How do you provide the life supporting system? How do we promote, human potential and all, the supporting system surrounding it? So people talk, oh, but there's a definition. You go there and you look, and there's a bunch of systems that they propose. Okay, but then natural law, I think it's the same problem, because then you're just introducing another concept, and then there are two concepts now. But I would say that natural law doesn't tell the whole picture either, I would say, because it doesn't talk about, it's not human-centric, it's not life-centric, because life doesn't care about other life, meaning if we all die, it doesn't matter, the universe continues. So I would say that wouldn't be necessarily, we want to continue living, I guess, right? I do. So in that system, I would say that it's not accurate enough. But my question was actually related, but can we do that in a trade system? Can we implement that? So you said that we can do it now, implement this proposal. Yeah. But just to complement the question, because I think we've, in the whole resource-based economy, groups and all, I thought that we find out that trade itself is a problem, and until we get rid of trade, we can't be life-promoting focused, because trade itself isn't fair. Let's say, using a very vague word, it's not focused on the benefits of people, but on the game itself. So I could go into detail, but so if the trade itself is a problem, how can we implement this now? And how do we measure that we're having a positive life-enabling impact? Because what's the mechanism? Because it seems to be so complex, so many variables. How do you know that your presentation now isn't harming people? I'm not saying that it is, but how do you know that my, I don't know, just me being here and not doing something else, and I'm not harming people? How do we measure that? And how do we implement this in the system if we agree that trade is a problem?
Yeah, so there's multiple levels to that. So firstly, I will state that I agree with you in respect of trade being the core fundamental problem here. It's and as McMurtry's diagnosed, I laid out the inner logic of the cancer system is the trade mechanism. I mean, both people lose, over time. So I agree with you on that what we have to do is remove that mechanism. I completely agree. But let's take water, for example, okay? Because this is the thing, we all blink all this out.
Scott. Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but I think Steve has to leave right now.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I have to leave. Scott, thanks so much for the presentation. Okay. And it's great to see everyone. And, I just wanted to say, as I'm listening to it, I've read Peter's new book and watched Moving Forward a few times, and I'm pretty much with McMurtry. I can understand him as he's in there, but when it gets into this explanation with all, I just don't. Sometimes I can't quite keep up with it, and I feel a little dumb, and I feel like what would help is like on each of these points of like the life, whatever, is an example. Like a quick example, like when you're talking about Richard Wolff and Noam Chomsky, they don't quite get it. How is that? Do you mean they're talking about having the people in charge of the means of production, but still producing things that can cause harm. Is that it?
Yeah, well, in a way, Steve, yeah. So in a way, so in the current model, every priced commodity is called a good. So, and this is not just a trivial oversight. So I want to make it really clear. Good, what does good mean to you? Does it mean a good thing or a bad thing? See, what's happened is the model that we endure at the moment, it makes no distinction between good or bad at production level. So that's why it churns out so much junk in the form of homicidal commodities that are creating, mass disease epidemics, because every priced commodity is called a good, even the objective bads, things like junk food. So what I'm talking about is Richard Wolff, and you use those examples, Richard Wolff and David Harvey, for example, the Marxists, they don't make this distinction, which makes all the difference between heaven and hell. So it's actually the life and death distinction that's missing, is the good versus bad at production level, because everyone's been conditioned to believe there is no objective measure of that, which is false. The life value compass has objective measures that no one can coherently disagree with. We just haven't got down there for all the reasons I've been stating. So it's a deep conversation, but it's the surface level logic has to be understood first. And no disrespect to Richard Wolff or David Harvey either. Like Charlotte said, it's conditioning. Like, we're all conditioned. It's
right.
We are so deeply conditioned in our instituted thought processes, like we know. Like Jacques Fresco's talked about for years. This is just another level of decoding, peeling away some of the conditioning. If we want to manage life support systems to enable life capacity rather than disable it, which as RBE is what we should be wanting to do, is to enabling life capacity over time. I hope that makes sense, because if your smoking's not a need, because if you stop your smoking, then your life capacities will be increased over time rather than disabled and destroyed. So yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so they're talking about producing goods, but they're not talking about whether those goods or life or death.
They may be generalizing, Steve, but they don't have an objective criterion to tell the difference. So as I said, like donut economics, it doesn't have a criterion to tell food from junk food masked as food.
If I was trying to explain this to like junior high school students or something, on each point I would stop and just give an example so you can understand what each thing means.
Absolutely.
Good point, Steve. Okay.
Yeah, because I can't quite get it sometimes. Yeah. So anyway, it's great seeing everybody.
You take care, Steve. Sorry, I didn't mean to distract things from Yuri's question about how do we know and how do we implement this axiom in terms of trade. So if you wanted to address that, Scott, and then we'll come to you, Richard.
Yeah. So Yuri, it's Yuri, is it? I don't want to mispronounce your name.
Yes, Yuri.
Yeah, Yuri. So so basically, let's just take water. Okay, so if we're going to manage our water, which is the first premise of having a society, and this is what this axiom does. It pulls us back to what's important. So self-evidently, but again, we just blinker it out. If we're going to manage the water, then the life capital understanding for that is, well, you got to protect your water. That you're not going to get any more. You have to protect your water. That's the starting point, and that's it, and there's nothing else. So that's what I'm talking about. So there's different ways to do that, obviously. So what we need to do is we need to make sure we don't lose. So this is why the capital concept's so important, because it is about cumulative gain over time without loss. We need to make sure we don't lose any water resources, any freshwater resources, and we need to make sure we gain it over time, right? So this is the thing. This is what's missing in our RBE discussions, is actually a mechanism of thought, a thought structure that can facilitate it. So what I'm saying, Yui, is you could, because let's face it, some people are not on board with RBE yet. but they want to protect the water, right? There's people campaigning. I mean, there's water wars going on in every country. It's happening in New Zealand here at the moment. It's all being bottled and privatized and shipped overseas, you know, polluting the air. It's why? To make more money. So what I'm saying is the life capital principle and the axiom, the life axiom, can be applied to a trade system. It might not be as good as what we're promoting, but it can be done because basically it's an understanding. It's an understanding of life capital, about cumulative gain over time without loss. And that's what the man on the street this isn't thinking about. And Richard's right, but someone has to be thinking about it. And that's my argument here, is that someone has to be thinking about managing the water and not losing any, but gaining it over time in respect of a system. And if we're implementing the RBE, then, you know, some of us need to be thinking about that and actually implementing it. So yeah, but you could do it in a trade system. You could, you know, the life. This is the beauty of the life axiom. It's applicable to all domains. There's not one domain that it's not relevant to, because life value, because all value whatsoever is life value. I mean, none of the values we hold in our heads, whether, you know, economic or political or religious or epistemic, anything cannot be expressed in reality without life value. So I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense, but it doesn't seem to fit my background, my knowledge. So it may be a little bit of clarification, because so basically what you're trying to say is that it's not a proposal for a system, but a let's say an agreement that we should do this. We should, specifically with the example of water, we should protect the water from the trade system. So we isolate the water from the trade system, so we can then treat this as a resource-based economy. And then the trade system, we know other business stuff, we deal with the trade system, because with the trade system, it's what matters is the economics of the trade system, right? So if it makes sense economically, financially, to privatize water, to start polluting water, they do it. If it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So how do we prevent that as a mechanism, as a system, that it's assured, you know, that it doesn't matter if, we'll lose money, but it doesn't matter, you know, because if people start losing money, we're seeing an example here in Brazil, where I live. They're trying to privatize one of the biggest reservoir of waters underground, and they're discussing about privatizing, selling that to Nestle, which is, we're losing that as we speak, you know. So it makes sense. We all agree that we should preserve water, but it makes extremely huge financial and economically for the country as well. There's a lot of benefits from the monetary system mindset. You know, we grow the economy, we have lots of money, an extra cash flow, but it's water. It's life supporting, life critical. So in the logic of the trade system, it doesn't seem to make sense that we could do that. But correct me if I'm wrong. You know?
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll try and explain it a different way. So let's have a look. Yeah. So basically, if you look, we're actually talking about a couple of different things working. Like, we're talking about two different things working with a dynamic here. So what I mean by that is you're talking about the reward reinforcement system and the problem that we have with that, which is one thing. What I'm talking about is a much broader issue, which is relevant to everything. And it's been relevant to trade systems for so bloody long as well, is that there are no life standards, no life coordinates. And so I guess what I'm saying is, in the trade system, let's imagine that we didn't know about an RBE and we weren't going to implement an RBE and we had never heard of it, right? But we wanted to protect our water, right? So the axiom tells us that we need to do that. I mean, you don't need an axiom to tell us that. This is Richard's argument, is that it'll happen automatically when we have a proper reward reinforcement system. I get it. I understand the argument. But the problem is we have a transition to make, and there are going to be a lot of people that aren't on board with the RBE just yet. So what I'm saying is we could actually forget RBE for a moment. We could actually implement the life standards overnight if the politicians were willing to implement it. Now, they're not going to, I agree with you, because basically the companies are being rewarded for it and they're all getting kickbacks. So why would they implement it? I get that. But if the public wanted to protect the water, then we need to manage that at the system-wide level. And basically, as I stated in the presentation, this axiom forms the criteria for assessing the validity of any law in existence. You can look at any law and then look at this 4-page document, and it will tell you whether the law is valid or not in respect of protecting our life capital with cumulative gain over time without loss. And so, and we're not just talking water, we're talking organic food, organic farming methods. We're talking, I mean, anything that is, we need to enable life capacity. That's the key, life capacity, our capacity. And
if I could break in, I think the key thing here is what you're saying. And I think what really addresses Yuri's question is, it would only be possible to integrate in trade as it is if everybody were to collectively demand that we support these life principles above profit principles.
Or some government finally getting their senses and realizing that we've got a failed system here and we need a life coherent system. And they could amend all their legislation overnight to be life coherent, and then they would be telling these companies to stop the water production. But to be honest, any like McMurtry said on my podcast, any of this water destruction, take water for example, it's going to have to have a schedule of stopping. It's not all going to be able to stop overnight. We've got to stop kidding ourselves that this overnight transfer thing is going to, if that's what we're proposing, is going to stop all the destruction overnight. There's going to have to be a schedule where they stop by degrees. Like this is what I'm talking about. You have to have an algorithm to manage that, and anyone that, I hate to be rude, but anyone that doesn't understand that yet, you've got a little bit more understanding to do. So, like, I agree with Richard when he says that the man on the street doesn't have to worry about this. Yeah, a lot of people aren't going to have to worry about this. But if we're implementing RBE, then, as I said, like I said in the presentation, we need to start thinking on the life coherent level and conversing, like we're doing now, conversing in a life coherent way, discussing, and it's how water interrelates with other systems too. If you just think water, we're talking about a categorical approach, and this is where we need to take a systems view, because that water comes from somewhere, and it's part of the ocean, the hydrological cycles, and you have, and it's in living ecosystems that have to be managed, and it has to be quantified. And anything is better or worse by the greater or lesser range of life capacities it enables.
Exactly.
That applies everywhere.
And it relates to the whole system. I think that's one of the things you also brought out, that it's talking about the interrelationship and talking about the planet and the thing as an organism.
But the reward reinforcement system is a real problem. Yeah.
I really have to let Richard talk now because he's
sorry. Yeah.
And besides that, as long as we're talking about possible governments getting their shit together, I think we really have to give Richard a chance.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
So, Richard, what did you want to say?
The first thing I want to say is how excited I am that we're having this conversation at this level, Scott. This is just such high level, intricate, fine detail RBE implementation. That's just so massive for me that we're even talking about this kind of precision here. That's fantastic. What I think Yuri's getting at there, and to try and knit it all together from my perspective, is that we already have life cycle analysis tools, and so we're seeing this in New Zealand already with our new government implementing laws about no more deep water oil exploration. We're seeing them looking at mining on conservation land, and they're trying to introduce the policies that have life coherent references. But the problem is, at the end of the day, yeah, there's some winners, but of course there's some losers, because they're not going to have any cash to pay their welfare payments, are they? Or to fix the roads, or to build hospitals. And so all the time we try and implement anything like this, no matter how enlightened it is, we're always going to have a pushback from the losers. We find ourselves in the win-lose ring again. It's always some winners and some losers. Whereas if we jump straight to RBE, and in that I mean September 2020 for New Zealand, we just stop using the money. We don't change anything else. We just take the money out of the system. Then the life ground analysis comes into every transaction that humans take. And the man on the street, when he says, oh, okay, so should I buy Coke now or water, immediately comes against that question further up the logistics supply chain. Because already we have legislation about mining, about water extraction, about foreign ownership of land. You know, these things are already in place, but there's always a pushback because somebody gets to lose by it. And I don't think that even the most enlightened new legislation or political perspective changes. I mean, I think this is what Yuri was getting at, really, is that there's always somebody going to push because they're losing their livelihood now. And so we can't introduce it. You know, we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. We can't introduce it until the primary driver for aberrant behavior, i.e. to get money, is removed. Stick in the middle.
Richard, you know
it's a technical.
You've got to do both at the same time.
Yeah.
It's really a chicken egg thing. It's really, you know, there might be an infinitesimal space of time when one gets started, and then you might be very much right. It has to be that mechanism. But without the consciousness, without the value system, no chance.
Why not? Why not?
Can I just say, well, Richard, the primary act is the act of understanding. So we don't do anything with our actions unless we understand. So the reason I'm talking about this now and doing this work now is because the RBE community, in my view, need to start understanding this so that when we move to RBE, whatever method we do, whether we do it through a zero billing law overnight or whether we do it through, you know, I know there's lots of different options, you know, I get that. We need to be life coherent. And so, and as I said in the presentation, this is all intuitive. So all I'm doing here is laying out what we already know, but it has never been laid out in a algorithmic form that no one can disagree with. And that's really important, by the way, because like I said at the end of the presentation, it's the collective agency that's missing. And so when you said to me, you know, the man, when he goes, he won't go buy a Coke. Well, it's not about the man whether he's going to buy the Coke or not. It's whether we produce the damn shit or not. And that is a system problem. And we have to do it. And as I said, we've got these multiple, you know, non-contagious diseases that have multiple causes. It's not just, you know, specific junk food. So what I'm proposing here is life standards in production. And that's all. It's nothing to be scared about. It's life standards in production, and there has to be we have to, you know, anarchism is not about no rules, it's no rulers, right? So, you know, all the anarchists always argue, I'm not saying we're proposing anarchism, but what I'm saying is they always argue, oh, we don't mean that there won't be any rules, we mean there won't be any rulers. And even Peter Joseph, when he presented his algorithm, which is life blind, by the way, and he knows it, because this algorithm will work with the one that Peter put forward as well. They worked in tandem, right? The design efficiency. When Peter Joseph put that algorithm forward, he stated quite clearly, you know, the sustainability and efficiency protocols that filter through everything that we produce has to go through some sort of regulated system. Feeding and housing the people of the world is a technical issue, not a political one. And we have to manage the systems that provide our life support. It's a technical issue. as I said in the presentation, it's a completely objective process and quantifiable, intuitively self-evident, but not yet understood. And that's all I can really say. If you don't understand it yet, it just means you don't understand it yet. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. But also, I'm not dismissing everything that you're saying either. I agree with everything you say on one level, but there's just there's different levels working here, you know? It's a system. So I hope that makes sense.
It's holistic.
Holistic.
I hate to really keep hammering on that, but this whole organism, I mean, that's what I really also like about what you were talking about, Scott, the organic element. And I was wondering, yeah, I mean, we're already pretty far over time, so maybe I can propose this as the last question. But you said that McMurtry, his work that bridges social, economic, and organic realms. And
ecological. So social, ecological, yeah. So it's managing the habitat, managing the way we interact with each other, you know, like it's intuitive and organic. So what we're putting into our bodies is proper, you know, life enabling. Yeah,
that's brilliant. I think for everybody, I mean, this was a really wonderful way of getting acquainted with the most important things. And I'm going to be, of course, posting this on our YouTube channel, both your presentations separately as well as the whole discussion, so that some people, you know, they don't have the time to watch everything, so they'll be able to watch both of them. And for those of you who have not seen my essay yet, I mean, it's not because I think it's so important to promote myself or anything, but it's just another kind of simplification of what I see are the essential aspects of McMurtry's theory as what I call the missing link in RBE theory. So I really believe, and I think Scott's been also echoing.
Charlotte, can I just say something just to close really quickly? So
yeah,
McMurtry.
I'm not closing yet, but let me finish.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were finishing. Sorry.
Yeah, I am, but you get a last word.
Okay. Okay.
So in terms of the missing link in RBE theory, as I say that Jacques Fresco, he implied it absolutely. Peter Joseph, he quotes it and he implies it. But, you know, seeing it stated in this axiomatic way, in this very clear-cut way, I think really makes this a grounded basis that structures, systems, we can rebuild from this, you know, and that's why it was so important to me. So I just wanted to show people, if you're interested, to read this essay of mine. So Scott, your closing word.
Oh yeah, cool. So thank you everybody for listening, and yeah, it is quite high level. I did try and make it as simple as possible. Sorry if it was a bit high level for some people, but it's okay. It's our job, I believe it's our job to use this sort of information, and like Charlotte says, you know, it's our job to make it relevant to the man on the street, you know, and I mean, it's already in his head. We just need to talk to him about it. And Richard's kind of already doing that on one level. So it's everything Richard's doing with the people, for example, on the street is in line with this. One thing I just want to say is McMurtry stresses this all the time, and this is really important, which I didn't put in my presentation, is that all past political theories have gone wrong. Why? Because they were life destructive. This one cannot go wrong. Why? Because it has it built into it that it cannot. And so, you know, like, and this is a benchmark. So anyone can test this, by the way. You know, there might be an alternative thing out there to do this. If you can find it, great. But this is the benchmark at the moment. It's an axis of 40 years work. And basically, if, you know, this guy's the new Socrates. I hope you guys realize who this guy is. If you can find an alternative, then we will test it. You know, we're about testing, right? So it's all self-evident and testable in the end. And I firmly believe that this can meet every counter argument from every thinking quarter. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and that is, after all, the scientific method.
Yeah.
The disproving. So, you know, if you can disprove it, great. I just want to mention that in the coming week, I'm going to be releasing a video interview I had with Travis Grant. We had a meeting with him, but the video didn't work out, so I interviewed him. He's working on 4 systems that are necessary for a community. So he's actually working out the specifics, the structures for when we move into RBE, how those communities, the structures those communities will have to be. That video's coming up. I did ask him, Scott. Yes, he's very familiar with McMurtry, and I'm going to be giving a talk on Friday at Z-Day in London. So I'll be posting that film on our YouTube channel also in the coming time. And in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have a social get-together here at Moving Forward. So invite everybody, come yourself. Let's just have a nice chat about what's going on, what you want to talk about. We'll be having a guest from New York who gave a presentation at Z-Day in Frankfurt. I think he'll be there, and otherwise we'll have a presentation from him. And after that, in July, I'm hoping to get Gabor Kiss from Envienta to talk about open sourcing and how that is a viable way of moving knowledge where the war is, as Scott said, and technology and unification together. So lots of stuff coming up. Great that you were all here. Thank you so much for your participation, for your interest, and see you again in 2 weeks, I hope.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.